is nothing but a mitochondria. So see, the mitochondria generally we'll use, but mitochondria is not a single cell organelle designation. It's a plural name. When you go for singular of mitochondria, it's mitochondrion. Now, when you take the whole cell, either plant cell or animal cell, what really is, the plant or animal cell will be surrounded by plasma membrane. And when you take the plasma membrane structure, it is a double membrane structure with lipids and proteins. The same kind of double membrane structure you will find within the cell also. For example, the mitochondria cell organelle. If you see in the structure, the mitochondria looks like this under electron microscope. You can't see the cell organelles under simple microscope. So here when you observe the structural aspect of mitochondria, the outer membrane is there and inner membrane is also there. So it's a double-layered membrane. So a question can be put in such a way that the double membrane, plasma membrane nature, plasma membrane is just outer part of cell. That kind of nature, whether you find within the cell or not, justify the answer. The question can be asked like this. Then the immediate answer could be mitochondria. There are some other cell organelles also we'll discuss later on. But mitochondria is the one which possesses plasma membrane like double membrane nature. So here clearly we can see the outer mitochondrial membrane and inner mitochondrial membrane. So almost similar to plasma membrane nature. What is the importance of having double membrane to mitochondria? Before getting into that concept, first see what mitochondria can be called. Like the crude names I gave, post office of the cell. Did you remember? Very good, Bhumika. Golgi body is the post office of the cell. Why? Because there the proteins produced from different parts of the cells will be packed and they will be mailed to their particular destination to work, isn't it? So in the same way, the mitochondria were given another common name, mitochondria. The mitochondria is generally called as powerhouse of the cell. Why it's called powerhouse of the cell? Now see, generally when you take the powerhouse food, what it will do? Generally the powerhouse is nothing but the place from where you will get the electricity, isn't it? So here, not exactly electricity, but the cell will get energy from mitochondria. That's why mitochondria is known as powerhouse of the cell. So how mitochondria is giving energy to the cell and why energy is needed for the cell. This is the whole concept behind mitochondria structural and functional aspect also. Now when you take the energy term, usually the energy in cell will be designated as ATP. Have you heard this word earlier, anyone of you? ATP. Sahas, do you have any idea about ATP abbreviation? No. Okay, fine. That's okay. Adenosine triphosphate. It's adenosine, Bhumika. Adenosine. Adenosine triphosphate. Now, adenosine is nothing but a nitrogenous base. So, what's the importance of this ATP? That we are going to see. Now, when you take any living thing, here I'm taking example human. Okay, you'll have a diet, and in diet you will take carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc. Isn't it? So, what's the purpose of taking this diet? To get energy, isn't it? So, how we are getting energy from the diet we are taking in? So, there should be some conversion. So, conversion of what? Conversion of carbohydrates or proteins or fats into a form called adenosine triphosphate. So, here you are taking a diet which contains these elements, and these elements will be converted into ATP. This ATP is acting as energy producer. So how ATP is acting as energy producer? Suppose assume that ATP is just energy currency. So I'm using crude words so that you will get a clear idea of the concept. What's the purpose of currency in general terminology? When you use currency, you will get something. You will buy something, isn't it? In the same way, if ATP is used by the cell gets energy. So how ATP is used as energy? So there is a process called three-step process, which generally called aerobic respiration. There is a misconception in the lower classes. If you remember, respiration generally will be used as if taking in gas and giving out gas, isn't it? So generally you'll have a concept like taking in and giving out gas is nothing but respiration. But when you come to cell biology, the aerobic respiration stands for giving out energy. How? By converting these components. So the process where the carbohydrates, proteins and fats in the diet are converted to energy is called aerobic respiration. Where it happens? It happens in mitochondria. So how it happens? In 3 steps. When you get into detail of aerobic respiration, you'll have 3 steps in which the food is converted to energy called ATP. The 3 steps includes glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. This is very basic concept. This concept carries lot much importance in further classes when you go ahead in higher classes. For example, for +1, +2 level, this whole terminology and process carries lot much importance because this is the basic of cell biology. So here what we learned, mitochondria is a cell organelle with 2 membranes, outer membrane and inner membrane, almost similar to plasma membrane structure. Mitochondria are also known as powerhouse of the cell. Then why mitochondria are called as powerhouse of the cell? Because they release energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So how the ATP is working? The ATP is working in the form of giving energy to the cell to perform various metabolic activities. So how this energy is coming? The energy is coming from the food which you take in, whether it's a plant body or animal body, or for that example human body. The diet which they take in will be converted to energy by a process called aerobic respiration. Here respiration stands for 3 steps of process where energy will be released in the cell. What are the 3 steps? Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. So these are the terminology. No need to get into depth of what the various reactions occurring in these steps. But through these steps, you are getting ATP that is sufficient at this of the cell. Now when you take the structural aspect of mitochondria, here if you take the mitochondria will have, I'm drawing a rough diagram over here. The mitochondria will have an outer membrane, and inside the outer membrane there is an inner membrane, but the inner membrane is not plain, but it shows foldings like this. Okay, so this is the easy way of drawing mitochondrial structure. So somehow it looks like this. So the green one is the inner membrane of the mitochondria, and the orange one is the outer membrane of the mitochondria. Now when you observe the inner membrane of mitochondria, it is having folded structure, isn't it? So those foldings or the foldings of the inner membrane of mitochondria are called cristae. Cristae. So this word I mentioned while we are discussing the endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi complex. In these cell organelles, you'll have a structure called cisternae, if you remember the structural aspect. Yes, did you remember these words? Bhumika? The cisternae word. Cisternae are the part of endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi complex. Isn't it? So here we are using a different word. What we are using here? Here we are using a word cristae. That's different. Okay. So in MCQ questions, a confusing point of multiple choice questions will have words like this: Golgi complex and endoplasmic reticulum, whereas cristae are the inner membrane foldings of mitochondria. Okay, inside the cristae, you'll have a fluid-filled structure called matrix. The purple one I'm shading inside the mitochondrial structure. So that is called matrix. So matrix is the fluid-filled part of mitochondria. Remember the terminology. Cristae, nothing but the inner foldings of the mitochondrial membrane, and matrix is the fluid-filled material present inside the mitochondria. These are the different structure part of mitochondria. Okay. Now, when you take the functional aspect of mitochondria, mitochondria is involved in aerobic respiration. Okay, Bhumika? So here, when you take the respiration, respiration is not just taking in and giving out gas, but in cell biology, respiration stands for conversion of materials which you take as diet into energy. So in which format energy will be released? It will be released in the format of ATP, where A stands for adenosine. Now during aerobic respiration, this conversion happens, and aerobic respiration takes place in 3 steps. What are the 3 steps? Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. Is that clear to you, Bhumika? So the 3 steps names I'm writing on the other side of the slide. Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, this is a scientist's name, and electron transport chain. So these are the 3 steps through which energy will be released from the diet which you have taken, from the carbohydrates and all. Okay? Yeah. So that is the structural and functional aspect of mitochondria. Here, only 5 points are carrying much importance. First point is mitochondria are called powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria is the place where aerobic respiration takes place. And through mitochondria, ATP will be released, which is the energy giving product inside the cell. When you take the structure of mitochondria, mitochondria will have an outer membrane, inner membrane. The inner membrane shows inner further foldings called cristae. And inside the cristae, you will have a fluid-filled material called matrix. That's all for mitochondria. Clear? Shall I move on to next slide?